Alright, so you want to make hi-hats from scratch. I'll show you how to do that today. Real quick before we get into it, I want to talk about what a hi-hat is. It's basically two cymbals put together. If they're far apart, it's kind of like a longer sound. If they're together, it's a really short sound. You know, so something like this. You know, the first one's an open hi-hat, second one's a closed hi-hat. They're generally used to keep time within a song. But you probably already know that. But so what actually is a hi-hat sound? It's basically just noise. You know, if we take a EQ and kind of look at what's happening, you know, it's very noisy. All the noise is basically coming through this high end area. And that pretty much tells you how we're going to do this. So to start, we're going to open up a synthesizer. You can use pretty much any synthesizer. You just want something that has, for like the very basic hi-hat, you just want something with a noise generator and then probably a filter or volume envelope. You can also mess with like filters and volume envelopes, but it's much easier to just do it all within one synthesizer. And since most synthesizers can do that anyways, you may as well do it within one synthesizer. If you don't have something like Citrus, you can get Vital. It's free to use. By the way, this is like my 5th or 6th time recording this video. I don't know why I'm having such bad luck with it, but if you could hit the like button, it would help me a lot because this was incredibly frustrating. Anyways, so we start with operator 1. We're just going to turn the noise up. I also turn the volume down so it's not going to blow out your eardrums here when I do this. All right, and then we're going to send operator 1 to the filter, and then from the filter, we're going to high pass. Which high pass you use doesn't matter too much. There's multiple high passes within Citrus, so we're going to basically cut out most of the low end, maybe turn up the resonance a bit, and then hear what it sounds like. Yeah. And see, so the filter isn't as steep as I would want it to be, so we're actually going to do, rather than do single, we're going to go to triple. That basically just makes it a steeper filter curve. So we're going to do something like that, and then with the volume envelope, we're just going to do like a pretty basic just curve like that. And that's basically your open hi-hat. You may also want to do something like this so that it cuts as soon as the note ends, but not like too quickly. Again, it's personal preference. This is just a very basic hi-hat sound though. And so then if you make the volume envelope very tight, you basically get a closed hi-hat. It's that simple. But there are a ton of ways to like add more character to the sound. And the big thing to think about is that white noise is like a very basic sound. Like all the frequencies are kind of evenly matched. And so if we go back to, here's an open hi-hat, kind of open, you get the idea. And then we look at the EQ again. So if we go back here, notice how this looks. It's very noisy, there's a lot of notes coming through, but there's also space between the notes. Same with this one to an extent. And that basically gives it more character that this last one just doesn't have. And so there's a lot of ways to go about that. You know, you can literally just go into a filter and like tweak different elements about it, you know, like really tight, like resonant, like peaks kind of like this, especially in like this region gives it a bit of a metallic sound, you know, which could be what you're going for. Hi-hats are made out of metal, right? There's a lot of other ways to achieve the metallic sound. There's also other ways to achieve this noise sound, but in ways that have more character. And so we're actually going to turn this noise off, and I'm going to teach you something that I figured out for myself. I don't think I've ever seen anybody else do it. You know, there probably is other people doing this. I just haven't seen anybody do it. But so I'm going to use frequency modulation to create noise without it being too noisy, if that makes sense. So we're going to start by modulating operator 1 by operator 2. Don't worry if you don't understand what that means. It doesn't matter right now. You're basically just modifying this sine wave by this sine wave. But to make it noisy, we want to create a feedback loop. So what we're going to do is modulate operator 2 by operator 3, and then modulate operator 3 by operator 2, right? So they're modulating each other in a loop. And see, that creates noise. It's very noisy, right? But you can tweak the amounts at which they're modulating each other, and see, that's less noisy. There's a bit more tone coming through. And you can actually get a ton of different noises by doing this. You can even change the frequency ratio of the different operators to get different sounds. But you get the idea. It's basically just the same as noise, but with a slightly different character to it. And then we can do what the TR-808 drum machine did, which was, it's actually pretty surprising. Rather than using any form of noise, they actually used detuned square waves. Because say we're just going to do 3 square waves for now. They use 6, but I don't have the patience to go through all that right now. But so we're going to send all these square waves to the filter. It's just 3 square waves. But then we're going to detune them. And see, you can kind of hear that like iconic TR-808 open hat sound. I mean, I didn't get it perfect, but that's basically what it's doing. Filtered detuned square waves. See, and if we take the filter off and lower the volume, that's the sound that it's actually making, but we're filtering out all that low end. You know, which is really interesting. And you can also do a closed hat with that. And then like for a bit more advanced techniques, like you don't have to do like the same exact volume curve as me. Like you can play around with stuff. You can play with like the envelope of the cut, like automate the filter. See, like maybe this has some more low end coming through at the initial hit. You know, that's kind of like a unique sound. It's kind of reminiscent of when you actually hit a hi-hat, you get like kind of a lower sound at first. I like that sound. That's a that's a cool sounding hi-hat, I think. So normally I would save all of these, but I've just gone through this video so many times that I don't feel like doing it again. So when it comes to saving them, you know, you can use Edison if you have it. If you don't have any way of like saving samples within your DAW, you can get Audacity. It's a free download. It can be a little annoying to use, but it should get the job done. You might have to like look up some guides on how to really use it, but it'll do what you need to do. I'm just gonna save this sound. Kind of clean it up. Also going to save it as an open hat, I think. I think I'm actually going to add a bit of noise. And I'm saving an open hat to show you an example of the next thing. And that's simply that you can literally just shorten and kind of fade out most open hats to get a closed hi-hat. It's that simple. You may also want to do it here with the volume envelope in the sampler. But also it's common in like trap music in particular, especially kind of like older trap music, to simply chop hi-hats. You just take a hi-hat, could be open hi-hat sound, could be a closed hi-hat sound, and you shorten it, but you don't fade it out at all. And so that can be a pretty common sound. Maybe you like the sound of it. We're getting close to the end, but I'm going to run you through how to do it in a different synthesizer. Here's Vital, which is completely free. But see, it has a sampler here in it. Rather than it being a noise generator, it's a noise sampler. You can also sample other stuff. It doesn't have to be noise, but it's set to noise. And then we just high pass. You know, we're going to high pass quite a bit. Going to make sure we send the sampler to the filter. You know, then we have the volume envelope. Yeah, and then let's hear what it sounds like. Didn't even have to hear it, and I made a decent open hat. That's how simple this is. And so then you can shorten it, close hat. Like I was talking about with filters, can add different character. You know, there's a lot of different stuff you can do. Comb filters in particular are going to be useful for hi-hat sound design. They give a metallic sound to things. And a big reason why I brought up Vital here is because I want to show you that it doesn't have to be white noise. It can be like any noisy sample. So like here is just sounds from a river. But see, it's literally just a recording of a river. The water splashing makes it rather noisy, so... You know, you might want some more high-end up here, but you can always layer something like this with another hat. You can also do that square wave trick from earlier in Vital, but make it wide by using Unison. It was pretty interesting. You know, so it's like that 808 hat, but it's really wide. And in terms of effects, you can kind of throw anything on hi-hat. You know, they're so kind of in the background that most people don't care too much. You know, most people keep them kind of basic for a few reasons, but like if you just throw in a few weird effects here and there, it could make some interesting sounds. You know, like maybe your closed hi-hats or recorded with a flanger on them, giving a pretty unique sound. You can do all sorts of stuff like that. But then talking about samples, I'm going to show you one last way to make hi-hats, and it's literally just using samples. The first thing we're going to do is something that's really common in drill music, which we're going to take a snare, and then we're going to do kind of like that drill hi-hat pattern, something like this. We're going to kind of shorten it to like closed hi-hat sound. This is mainly for closed hi-hats. Then maybe pitch it up a bit, and then filter it. And we just conveniently had this high-pass filter already here. But we don't actually want to do a high pass. We want to do a shelf. And the reason why we want to do a shelf is because we want some of the character of the snare coming through. And then we can maybe further lower this without completely getting rid of it. Maybe even boost this. That's kind of how a lot of like drill hi-hats are made. You know how it has like a different feel to it. But you don't have to do that with just snares. You can do that with any kind of noisy sample. Like we already showed with the river sample in Vital, but you know, there's a lot of different ways you do it. So like here, I'm going to take a really quiet sample and then I'm going to normalize an area that doesn't actually have a lot of sound going on. You know, and then we probably want to filter out this. I don't know exactly what's causing this. We'll do a high pass with this. You have a very unique hi-hat that does everything a hi-hat needs to do. The one problem with using samples is that it is hard to get a good open hat sound using samples. But we're going to try. So simply make the length longer. don't have it fade out as much. So part of the problem with this sample when it comes to being a hi-hat is just not long enough, but there are a few ways you can kind of stretch it. You know, you can quite literally time stretch it here. A little goes a long way, and then pitch it up. And then we kind of have an open hi-hat. Maybe not the best sounding open hi-hat. But you know, if you experiment with different samples, maybe you'll come across something you really like. And that's really what you're looking for, is just, if you come across something you like, save it and use it. That's pretty much how sound design works. But so yeah, that's how to make hi-hats. Lots of different tips and tricks on how to make hi-hats, open hi-hats, close hi-hats, all that. I do already have a ton of other videos planned. You know, I have more in sound design. I'm going to do, I think, claps, snaps, and probably rim shots all in one video. That's probably going to be the next sound design video. I may do cymbals, may not. I haven't decided yet. It's going to be a lot of the same tips as this, just trying to get the frequency balance right. Might end up being a video of itself. You know, it'd be like ride and crash cymbals mainly. I find them pretty difficult, and I don't know if that video is actually going to work out, but that's a possibility. You know, let me know in the comments if you want that. And yeah, that's that.